Welcome to Metagame. I'm Alex Rock. Today we're looking at a chip company reportedly valued at $10.3 billion that has hardwired its entire fate to one architecture, the transformer, and what happens when the incumbent, the acquirers, and the regulators all make their moves in the same 12-day window. Let's get into it. There's a chip company right now worth a reported $10.3 billion, and it only wins if the entire world keeps betting on one idea, one architecture, one shape of a neural network. If that shape falls out of fashion, the whole thing is a very expensive paperweight. Let me introduce you to Etched. Etched builds what the industry calls an ASIC for transformers. Translation for the back row, it's a chip hardwired to run one specific kind of AI model, the transformer, the thing behind every large language model you've ever heard of. Most chips are generalists. They'll run anything you throw at them, a little slower, a little more expensive. Etched went the other direction. They stripped out everything else. They built a chip that does one thing and one thing only, and does it faster than anything general purpose can. That's the pitch. That's also the trap. And we'll get there. First, let me set the table, because the number that matters isn't only Etched's valuation, it's the company it keeps. Here's the reported figure, and I want to be honest with you, the way nobody on financial television ever is. That $10.3 billion valuation, it's the premise of the story, not a confirmed print. It's reported, it's estimated, it's the number attached to Etched's name in the conversation. I'm not going to stand here and pretend a document crossed my desk. Treat it as the wager, not the receipt, because here's the receipt. On the 22nd of July, Intel bought an AI chip startup for $2.5 billion. Cash money, market clearing, this is what it costs price. Now, this is single source reporting. The company that got bought wasn't even named in what I've got, so I'm flagging it the way an honest person flags things. But directionally, it tells you everything. When Intel writes a $2.5 billion check to own a piece of specialized silicon, that's the going rate for a seat at this table. So sit with the juxtaposition. Etched's $10.3 billion is a conviction wager. Intel's $2.5 billion is a price. One is what a founder and his backers believe the future is worth. The other is what the future actually cost, in cash, on a Tuesday in July. And who's writing the conviction check on Etched? Sequoia. Among the backers, Sequoia doesn't do timid. When they lean into application-specific inference silicon this early, they're not renting exposure to a theme. They're making a call about who gets to compete in AI hardware at all. Because that's the real story here, and it's the one nobody frames correctly. This is not a wide-open field. This is not 1,000 plucky chip startups racing towards some democratized silicon future. This is a knife fight between a handful of names at the very top of the market. On one side, the reigning champion. On the other, a narrow set of purpose-built challengers, each one raising sums that would have been unthinkable for a hardware company a decade ago. The capital isn't spreading out, it's pooling. It's concentrating around a tiny cluster of frontier infrastructure companies, and if your name isn't on the short list, you don't get to play. Now let me tell you what the champion did. On the 15th of July, 1 week before that Intel deal, Nvidia launched a new AI inference GPU, no dollar figure attached, and again, single source, so hold it lightly. But the timing tells you the whole game. Inference is the segment these specialized startups are hunting, and the incumbent didn't ignore them. The incumbent walked straight into the room they were trying to build in and shipped a product aimed right at it. That's not a company that feels safe. That's a company defending territory. And when the general purpose giant starts shipping purpose-built hardware, it tells you the specialists found something real. You don't defend a hill nobody's climbing. Then 5 days before that, the tailwind. The 10th of July, the Commerce Department approves an expansion of AI chip manufacturing. Single source, directional, you know the drill by now. But policy just blessed a specialized silicon as strategically important. And here's who benefits from a supply-side green light like that. Not the little guy in a garage, the well-capitalized frontier names, the ones who can actually stand up capacity. Regulation in this business is a moat with a government stamp on it. So stack it up. In the span of 12 days, a $2.5 billion acquisition, a champion shipping a defensive weapon, and a regulator clearing the runway for whoever's already big enough to use it. 3 moves. Every single one concentrates power upward toward the names that already have the capital and the capacity. The frontier isn't getting more crowded, it's getting more exclusive. And Etched is standing right in the middle of it with a $10.3 billion bet and a chip that does exactly one thing. Which brings me back to the trap I promised you. Here's what makes Etched the sharpest and the most exposed name on the board at the same time. A general purpose chip is a hedge. If transformers fade, if some new architecture eats the world next year, a generalist shrugs and runs the new thing a little slower. Etched can't shrug. Etched built a chip that is a leveraged bet on the transformer staying king. 2 bets, actually, stacked on top of each other. Bet 1, a handful of infrastructure names capture this entire market. Bet 2, the specific architecture. Etched hardwired into silicon keeps winning long enough to earn back that valuation. Get both right, and you own inference. Get the second one wrong, and the most beautiful chip in the world is running a race nobody's entering anymore. So here's the question I'd put to any allocator paying attention. When Intel is paying $2.5 billion to buy into this category, and the champion is shipping a purpose-built GPU to defend it, is a single architecture startup the sharpest expression of the frontier bet? Or is it the most fragile one? Because those aren't the same question, and the market keeps pretending they are. The concentration is real. Money is flowing to a narrow set of names, and being on that list is worth an enormous premium. That's the durable part. What's not durable, what nobody's pricing honestly, is the difference between a company betting that a few winners take the market and a company betting that plus one specific architecture never gets dethroned. The first bet is structural. The second is a wager on the intellectual fashion of machine learning holding still. And machine learning has never held still for anything. Smart money knows the difference between concentration and specialization. Concentration says, back the shortlist, because the shortlist wins. Specialization says, pick which member of the shortlist has hardwired its fate to an assumption. Etched did that on purpose. It's the whole value proposition. It's also the whole risk, and you cannot separate the two. The thing that makes it fast is the thing that makes it fragile. That's the tension in the $10.3 billion. It's not a valuation on a chip. It's a valuation on a belief about how long an idea stays on top. Sequoia thinks the answer is long enough. Intel just spent $2.5 billion getting exposure to the same category without betting the entire house on one design. Two ways to play the same concentration. One is a conviction wager on durability. The other is a price paid for optionality. So back to the chip that only wins if the world keeps betting on one idea. That reported $10.3 billion isn't the story. The story is that in this market, the capital has already decided only a few names get to compete, and the real question is no longer whether you back the frontier. It's whether the frontier company you're backing has left itself anywhere to run if the one thing it's built on stops being the one thing that matters. Thanks for listening to Metagame. I'm Alex Rock. We'll be back with more market intelligence you can actually use. Stay sharp.
Grab news. Thomas.